ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ.
सुरासुरैर्वन्दिता पादपद्मं लोके जरारुग्भय मृत्युनाशं दातारमीशं विविधौषधीनाम्. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you to the sessions on Pramati Ayurveda. So currently we will be dealing with the anatomy and the physiology sessions, mainly focusing the syllabus point of view that is concerned with respect to the first year BAMS syllabus according to the curriculum. So the anatomy and the physiology classes, it is not going to be textually separate. So these sessions will be something that will be concept wise, so that we better understand the concept in a better way than going, as in a textual format, like the definition, etc., the anatomy, the vasculature. So instead of going in an order, we will see everything in total. But along with that, so usually the anatomy and wherever the required physiology is needed with respect to that anatomy, what we have already dealt. So we will be dealing with the physiological aspect of each too. Okay, so it will not be something which is very distinct and separate, that now first we will see only the anatomy of the heart and next we will see the physiology of the heart. So it is better understood when both of it is clear. So we'll be starting off these sessions on the anatomy and the physiology. So it will also be concentrating with respect to the Ayurvedic point of view also. So to begin with today, so the topic assigned is the anatomy and the physiology of the cardiovascular system. So I hope all of you have had looked into the orientation sessions that were taken, that was hosted by Pramati Ayurveda. So all of you are now fresh into learning, medical learning. So in the first year, you will be having the complete anatomy and physiology, the both modern point of view and the Ayurvedic point of view. So what is the Rachana part of it? What have our acharyas told? How the physiology is explained? Everything you would have to know in both the aspects. Okay. So let us not start with much deeper and complicated explanations of all these anatomy and physiological aspects. Let us start from the scratch so that we get to know and we absorb the basic fundamentals or the basic basement, whatever is required with respect to the anatomy and the physiology. Okay, so today we will start with the anatomy and physiology of the cardiovascular system. I forgot to introduce myself in the beginning. So I'm Dr. Ranjani Deshpande. I completed my BAMS and MS in Shalyatantra from Government Ayurveda Medical College and YIC from SVYASA. So I will be from now on engaging certain aspects of the syllabus that is assigned to me with respect to either the Rachana or the Kriya or Shalya, whatever it is. So whatever is the topic assigned, so we will start discussing it together in a complete, not in a the basic, the typical manner of textual manner, but in a slightly different angle where we'll try to understand the concept more than just going into the details or the by hearting the definition part of it. Okay. So today, now when we start the anatomy and physiology of cardiovascular system. So very first thing when we are learning the anatomy of any organ that might be. So usually when this is the board, whoever is writing the anatomy, whoever is drawing the diagram, so kindly keep a note that always keep this in your mind. This is the right side depicted will be, this is the right part of the organ, this will be the left part of the organ. Okay. So this R and L has to always be kept in mind. So because when you see, then it will be right will be this to you and left will be this to you. But always textually or when it is depicted on the board, always this is right and this is left. Okay. So the first thing what we will see today. Okay, so let us start by drawing the diagram. Okay, so the first thing is the heart has lower two chambers. So let us consider these two are the two lower chambers of the heart. So the basic terminology is, I'm sure that all of you would have had read the systems, that's all the systems of the human body from the 9th standard and a little bit advanced way in the first P1 and the second P. So even though we have read it, so we will start it from the scratch, but I hope that all of you are familiar with at least the basic terminologies like the ventricles and the aorta, the atrium, things like that. Okay. So starting, so we have the bottom chambers of the heart. So they are called as the ventricles. Okay. So they are called as ventricles. So we will name it 1. Okay. So we have 1 is the ventricles. So we have the right ventricle and we have the left ventricle of the heart. Now moving further, this left ventricle particularly has a thick layer of muscle. On the contrary, the right side also has the layer of muscle, but it is a little bit thinner than compared to the left part of the heart. So let us draw the muscle layer like this. So the left side is okay. So the left side is thicker than the right side. That is the layer that is the muscle layer of the ventricles. That is the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Now, why is that the right ventricle has a thinner layer of muscle and the left ventricle has a thicker layer of muscle? So that we will completely understand as we move forward. That is because now once we complete it, it is more understandable. But to explain it now in a simpler way, it is through the left ventricle that the blood will be pumped to all the other portions of the body. That is, it will go into the systemic circulation. What is systemic circulation? Systemic circulation is that wherein the blood flow happens to the entire system of the body. So that is called as systemic circulation. So it is through the left ventricle. Through the right ventricle, the blood will go to where it will go to the lungs. So if you consider the body anatomically, the heart and the lungs, the lung is anatomically closer and systemic circulation is much larger and farther area wherein the blood has to be pumped and pushed through. That is why, so the left ventricle has to pump a little bit more with a more caliber and more force. That is why the muscle of the left ventricle is thicker than compared to the muscle of the right ventricle. It is thicker, it has the same function, but it is comparatively thinner than that of the left side. Okay, now moving further, what is that? So next, focusing the left ventricle. So in the left ventricle, the first thing is there is a valve. So let us draw the valve in. There is a valve that faces upwards. Okay, now after this valve comes another valve that is facing downwards here. This is at the border of the ventricle. So we have the ventricle here. So we have one valve here. We have another valve. upper portion will be the next upper chamber of the heart, which we will draw further. Now, from the valve, whatever we have that faces upwards, there is a large artery that is going up. So let us depict it. Okay, so we have depicted the large artery. Now let us complete the atrium. So the atria again, it has a considerably thinner muscular layer. Okay. So here it is thinner. Okay. So now we have the ventricle. Let us name, so this we have the atrium. So this is 2. 2 is atrium. Okay. So to be more precise, it is the left ventricle and the left atrium. Okay. So after the left ventricle and the left atrium, now we have seen that we have drawn a valve, right? So there is a valve here between the atrium and the ventricle. So this valve is called as atrioventricular valve because it is between the atrium and the ventricle. Okay. Now this atrioventricular valve is made up of 2 cusps. Okay. So it has 2 cusps like this. So that is why this atrioventricular valve is also called as the bicuspid valve or the mitral valve. So we have 3 names in general. It is the left atrioventricular valve, or it is also called as the mitral valve, or it is also called as the bicuspid valve. Okay, so 3 here is bicuspid valve. Okay, now the next valve that we saw that is facing upwards is number 4. So this is what? This is the valve that is, between the aorta and the ventricle. So this large vessel that is leaving the left ventricle is the aorta. So this is called as the aortic valve, the left aortic valve. It is also referred as a semilunar valve. So that is why it is called as aortic semilunar valve. So 4 is ASLV, that is aortic semilunar valve. So we have now 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now after the aortic semilunar valve, now there is something that is drawn here. These are nothing but the pulmonary veins. Actually, they are 4 in number. Okay, but I have diagrammatically represented only 2. There are 4 pulmonary veins that comes and drains into the left atrium. Okay, so these are what now? I'll just erase this just not to get confused. This 4 depicts 4 pulmonary veins. So this is pulmonary. This is the pulmonary veins. So the next one what we have is this. This is nothing but the aorta. Okay. So now this will complete a picture of the left side of the heart. So what all we have? So we had the left ventricle first, and then covering the ventricle we have a layer of muscle which is thicker on the left side and thinner on the right side. Then we looked into two kinds of valves. That is one between the left atrium and the left ventricle, which is the left aortic ventricular valve or the mitral valve or the bicuspid valve. And then another upward direction, the valve facing upwards between the ventricle and the aorta is called as the aortic semilunar valve. Okay. Now we will see the same picture moving to the right part of the heart. Okay. So one thing what we have to keep in mind here is the veins. Suppose we saw pulmonary veins, right? So this is called as pulmonary veins. Pulmonary means lungs. So this pulmonary vein carries the oxygenated blood that comes through the lung. So it will be rich in oxygen content. That is, it will be having the oxyhemoglobin. So the a good oxygenated blood will come into the left atrium through the pulmonary veins. So a better definition of the artery or the vein is something that any vessel that carries blood away from the heart is called as artery. So if you're going away from the heart, then it is artery. If you're coming towards the heart, then you can call it as the vein. That saying, most of the cases, vein is that which carries the oxygenated blood and the artery which carries the oxygenated blood. That is the usual definition what we know. But here there is an exception. So a better anatomical description of an artery or a vein could be even more better when we say that any vessel that carries blood towards the heart is a vein. Any vessel that carries blood away from the heart is called as the artery. Okay. Now moving into the right side of the heart. So again we have the same scenario here. And okay, at the border of the ventricle, we have two valves, one facing downwards and the other facing upwards. Okay. Now, just like the we had the aorta that moved through the from the aortic semilunar valve. From here, we have another big artery that quickly divides into two. Okay. So this is our pulmonary artery. Okay. So this quickly divides into two and each of it will go to each of the lungs, right lung and the left lung. So now we have to complete the atrium here, right? So here again, we have the aorta sends the blood to all the systemic circulation. So when the oxygenated blood goes to the systemic circulation, it gives up a little amount of oxygen, not completely, but little bit. So now this partially deoxygenated blood has to come back to the heart, right? So here what happens? So this comes from okay. So now we will complete the So there is a large vessel that will pour the partially deoxygenated blood from the other tissues into the right atrium. So that is called as the Vena Cava. So the vein that drains from the upper portion of the body is called as the superior Vena Cava, and the vein that drains from the lower portion of the body is called as the inferior Vena Cava. So now let us start marking it. So the last thing what we saw was 6. So next we have 7. So let that be the right ventricle. Then you have 8. So 7 is right ventricle. 8 is the right atrium. Okay. Then we have 9. So this is 9. And this is So 9 is what? Atrioventricular valve on the right side. Like the left side had 2 cusps. This side has 3 cusps. So it is called as the tricuspid valve. So 9 is tricuspid valve. Then 10 is, so this is something that is which is between the ventricle and the pulmonary artery. So this is the pulmonary semilunar valve. Okay, so 10 is pulmonary semilunar valve. So rising from here, we had what? We have the pulmonary artery. So 11 is pulmonary artery. The rest we will write it on this side. We have the pulmonary artery, that is the 11. The next we drew what? 12 and 13. So 12 is the superior vena cava and 13 is the inferior vena cava. So this is the basic details of the anatomical description of the heart. So we have both the atrias, both the ventricles, the vein entering into the atria, and the arteries that is leading through the ventricles. So we have all of this. So now we have the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava also. Now, again, applying a little bit of physiology here. Now we know this part of the anatomy. Now we will see how the blood flows through the heart. Okay. So what we have here is, so we know that diagrammatically we have written only 2, but there are 4 pulmonary veins. So this pulmonary vein will carry oxygenated blood into the left atrium. Okay. Once it comes into the left atrium, this left atrium will contract. When the left atrium contracts, this mitral valve will open. So it is something that is facing downwards. So it opens like this. It closes. Okay. So it immediately opens. So when it opens, the blood from the left atrium will come into. So we have blood coming here. So it has come into left atrium. Then this will open. That is the mitral valve will open. Now the blood will come into the left ventricle. Once it comes into the left ventricle, what will the left ventricle do? It will again contract. So when it contracts, it will contract upward and inwards. Why it has to contract upwards and inwards? Because the blood has to go next where? Into the aorta. So there is no meaning in if it contracts downwards like the atrium. So it has to contract upwards like this. Because of which? Because of the pressure increases and because of the twitch, what happens? The blood will swirl into and it will move into the aorta easily. Okay. So when it contracts, so it contracts upwards and inwards. So next, now the blood is going into the here. So when it comes here, when the pressure increases, that is the aortic semilunar valve will open. It will open upwards. So when it opens upwards, the blood will enter into the aorta. From the aorta, it will move further into the other arteries, other vasculature, and the tissues will be, perfused. Okay, so this is how the oxygenated blood goes. Contrary, what happens on the right side? So it is not that first this contracts, this. Together, both the atria will contract. Together, both the ventricles will contract. And on each side, we are just seeing because what happens, because each circulation goes different places. So that's why we are discussing separately. Okay. Now, what happens in the right side here? So now we have blood coming from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava will bring the partially deoxygenated blood into where? Into the right atrium. So from right atrium, again here what happens? this, it will come to the tricuspid valve. Again, it's a downward facing valve, so it will open. So once it opens, the blood will come into the right ventricle. Again, here there is an upward and inward pressure, because of which now the blood will move to the PSLV, that is the pulmonary semilunar valve. So this valve will now open. So once it opens, it moves through both the divisions of the pulmonary artery. And next, this pulmonary artery will give one branch to the vein. So that part of circulation, that part of physiology, we will see in further sessions. As of now, this is what happens in the heart is what we have to know. Okay, so this is how the circulation happens. So from this pulmonary artery, this will branch to the left lung, and this will go into the right lung. What happens there exactly? That part of physiology we will see it later. So now what did we do? We saw the basic anatomical structure of the heart, and now we also know through these structures of the heart how the blood flows. What happens in the left part of the heart and what happens in the right part of the heart. So this much we have known. Now next, moving further. So by this, what do we get to know? We get to know that the blood flow through the heart. For the blood flow to happen in the heart in this particular way, what is important? One is the contraction, for which the musculature is important. That we will see later. Another thing what is very, very important is the role of these things in green color. That is the valve. That is the tricuspid valve, the PSLV, the ASLV, and the mitral valve. One thing, just for the sake of information, actually the PSLV and ASLV also have 3 cusps, but that is not called as tricuspid valve. Always tricuspid valve only refers to the right atrioventricular valve. So that is just for information. Okay. So the major role in the blood flow through the heart is regulated by these valves. Okay. Why? Because why there is a valve? So we have valves in taps, right? In how the water flow. The same mechanism is here. Why valve? As soon as the blood moves here, whatever it is open, it will close. Okay, it will close. And when the pressure in the ventricles increases, it will lock. It will become tight. So that when the pressure increases, this should not open up, right? Whatever is like this, it should not open up again, and the blood should not go back to the left atria. On the contrary, it should go into the aorta. So then what happens? This bicuspid valve will lock, so that it will not allow backflow of the blood. So all these valves play a major role to ensure one-way flow of blood, which is very, very important. If there is regurgitation, then that becomes a separate complete pathology. Okay, that should not happen. Always the blood should move in the same direction, which is guided or guarded by these valves. Now, suppose if there are only these valves, is it sufficient? Heart is a very, very important organ. There should never be, regurgitation of blood. Okay, because of which, if it is only these valves, musculature, is it sufficient? So no, right? At some point it could get weak, or it could, if suppose if it is not adhered properly, then as soon as the blood moves through the aorta, it should not come back again. It should seal and block, right? What if this does not happen? So is this sufficient? No. So there is an extra, anatomical structure that we can see here. So there are certain tendinous structure. Okay. So we have tendinous structures that are moving from the valves. Okay. So these tendinous structures, so they are called as tendinous cords. Okay. So we will name them as 14. The next number is 14, so I'll name it here. Okay, so this is tendinous cords, or it is also called as chorda tendinae. Okay, So what these tendons will do, these tendons are attached from the valve into the muscular layer of the heart, so that it will keep the valves firm, so that it will not allow extra, contraction or extra expansion of the valve. So it should be optimum. For that, these tendons, only if these tendons are there, is it suffice? No, right? This should again get adhered into something else. Only then you have a complete, corrected grip or the pressure applied. So what happens here is these tendons will get embedded into the musculature through certain structures. Okay, and they are called as the papillary muscles. So this is 15. Okay, so now we have the papillary muscles. So the tendinous cords will become rooted into the wall of the heart by specialized muscle cells, which are called as the papillary muscles. Okay, so this we came up to the further deeper anatomy of the heart. Now, moving further, concentrating on the muscles of the heart. Okay, so until now next thing what we will be seeing is the muscles of the heart. I'm dealing it here because it will be easier to draw when the picture is already there. Okay, now outside the heart there is a fibrous tissue that covers the entire outer surface of the heart. Okay, so this is a very thick layer and it covers the entire outer surface of the heart. So why it is very thick? Because it will prevent the heart from over expansion. Okay, so that is called as the pericardium, number 16. Okay, so 16 is the pericardium. Okay, now moving further, what is there next in the inside? Okay, so inside of layer, it's a very thin layer and it's a very smooth layer. I'm sorry, this has to be here. Okay. So the inside of the heart also has the another layer which is called as the okay. So this inner layer is very thin layer and it is a very smooth layer. So it is a layer of squamous vascular endothelial cells. So it has okay, and this is called as, we will name it 17. So we had the pericardium, now we have the endocardium. Okay, so this is the inner layer. So it is very smooth, not like how I have drawn crudely. It is very smooth. Why? Because it should not cause any turbulence to the flow of blood, because that will change the pressure and the entire cycle. So that is why there should absolutely be no turbulence. So it is a very smooth layer and a thin layer of layer which is inside the heart, of which is made up of the squamous vascular endothelial cells, and that is called as the endocardium. Now we had already seen this layer, right? That is covering the right atrium, okay. So we have another layer that we had already seen in the beginning, that it has a thick layer on the left ventricle and it is a little thick. Okay. Now this middle layer of the muscle layer of the heart, now it contains band of specialized muscles. Okay. It has bands of, okay, and they are striated muscles. Okay. The kind of muscles, so we have learned different kinds of muscles, skeletal muscles, smooth muscles, striated muscles. In the same way, so the muscle that is present in the heart, that's the middle layer of the heart, it is a specialized, muscle, and they're arranged in various band forms, and they are which kind of muscle? They are the striated muscles that are present. Okay, and this striated muscle is something which allows the heart to contract. Now we saw, right, when the blood comes from the pulmonary veins, the atria contracts. Simultaneously, when the blood comes from the vena cava, the right atrium contracts, the ventricle contracts. Who contracts this ventricle? Who contracts the atria? It is this middle layer of the heart that helps you to contract the heart in the most optimum possible way. So that is why if you say which is the muscle of the heart, it is not referred to either the pericardium or the endocardium. Always the muscle of the heart is nothing but the sorry for the disturbance. So we shall now continue. So when the blood comes into the through the pulmonary veins into the left atrium or through the superior and inferior vena cava into the right atrium, it helps you. There is something that contracts, because of which the blood will move from the atrium to the ventricle. So what is that which contracts is? It is the specialized muscle, striated muscles of the myocardium that will help you to contract. So what is the muscle of the heart? Or when somebody asks what's muscle of the heart, directly means it is nothing but the myocardium. It is not the endocardium or not the pericardium. Okay, so this is with respect to the muscle of the heart. Now there is some certain structure which also contains specialized muscles that separates the two half of the heart, the right side of the heart and the left side of the heart. So what is that? So this anything that separates anatomically, it is called as the septum. Okay, so we have not written myocardium, right? So this is 80. So this is myocardium. Next, so this is the septum that separates both the portions of the heart. So we have 19. Okay, so this 19 is called as the cardiac septum. Okay, we have the cardiac septum. So we can see that from the left part of the heart, the blood will move where? It will move into the systemic circulation. So it will move into the body. So most of the time, the left side of the heart is considered or usually referred to as the body pump. Okay, so the left side is the body pump. Through the right side, where it goes into the lungs. So the right side is called as the lung pump. So usually it is called as the lung pump. Okay, so from the beginning, what all we saw right from, we have the two ventricles, then we saw the atrium. 3, we have the bicuspid valve between the left atrium and the left ventricle. Okay, then 4, we have the ASLV, that's the aortic semilunar valve. Aorta is one of the large artery that leaves the left ventricle, and between the aorta and the left ventricle, you have a valve. Okay, to check one-way flow of blood. So you have the aortic semilunar valve. So from the aorta, the 5, we have the pulmonary veins. What are pulmonary veins? These are actually 4 veins. Diagrammatically, we have depicted only 2. So these veins will bring the oxygenated blood from the lung into the left atrium. So we have 5, that is the pulmonary veins. Next is the aorta 6 that leaves the left ventricle. It will carry the oxygenated blood and it will move and push the blood to the systemic circulation. Next 7, we have the right ventricle moving. So this will complete the left part of the heart. Then we have the right ventricle and the right atrium. 8. Okay. 9, we have the tricuspid valve, which is the valve that is between the right atrium and the left ventricle. And then we have the pulmonary semilunar valve, which is between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery that will leave the right ventricle. Okay, so this is facing upwards. Next, we have the pulmonary artery. So this pulmonary artery, as soon as it takes off, it quickly branches into 2, and each of it will go to each of the lung. Okay. Next, coming to the 12, we have the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava. Just like how pulmonary veins bring oxygenated blood, the superior vena cava and inferior vena cava will carry all the partially deoxygenated blood from the lower part of the body and the upper part of the body and puts it into the right atrium. Now, from the right atrium, next 12 is the inferior vena cava that we saw. Then 14 is the chordae tendineae. Now, before which we have, when we saw the flow of blood. So oxygenated blood coming from the pulmonary vein will come into the right left atrium, and this bicuspid valve will open. Blood will come into the left ventricle. It will contract. It will move. How? The ASLV will open and it will move into the aorta, and from aorta to systemic circulation. On the contrary, the right side, deoxygenated blood from the SVC and the IVC will come into the right atrium. It contracts, and which will as well as when the right atrium contracts, this tricuspid valve will open. Blood will flow into the right ventricle. It will contract, and the PSLV will open, and the blood will flow through the pulmonary artery to each of the lungs. So this is the flow of blood. Now, for this flow of blood ensure one-way flow of blood. So for that, it has tendinous cords, okay, that attaches the valves deeper into the muscle layer. So to make it attach deeper into the muscle layer, there are special muscles called as the papillary muscle, which will attach the lower part of the tendinous cord into the, it will root the tendinous cord into the muscular layer. Next, so we saw the tendinous cords and the papillary muscles. Then is the muscles of the heart. So moving into the muscles of the heart, we have an outer layer fibrous sac, which is very thick and tough layer. Why? It will protect the heart from not expanding more than necessary. Okay, so that is a fibrous sac. So this is called as the pericardium. Okay. Inside contrary, there is again a small, very thin layer which is made up of squamous vascular endothelial cells, which is very smooth with absolutely no turbulence. Okay, which is with absolutely no variations to avoid the turbulence of the flow of blood. Okay, and next comes the middle, very thick layer. It surrounds the right left atrium and the right left ventricle, which is made up of special bands of muscles, and it is made up of striated muscles. And it is because of these myocardial muscles that the atria and the ventricle on the whole, the complete heart, it contracts to the full optimum level. So that is maintained by the myocardium. So that is why it is referred to as the muscle of the heart. Now moving to the septum, that is, or the space that is between the right and the left side of the heart. So that is called as the cardiac septum. Okay. So then what we saw, from the left side of the heart, the blood will move into the body. So it is called the left part of the heart. Usually it is referred to as body pump. And through the right side of the heart, the blood will go into the lungs. So that is it will go into the pulmonary. That is pulmonary anatomy or the lungs. So that is why the right part of the heart is called as the lung pump. So today I think it is suffice to end the session with this much of information. So we have covered right now the basic anatomical structure that we have to know with respect to the heart and the basic physiology of movement or the flow of blood through the anatomy what we have learned, and then we saw the names of the musculature of the heart. So with this we will complete today's sessions. So in the further sessions we will further move on into what happens, like now we saw it moves into each of the lungs. So what happens and how exchange of blood happens between the heart and the lung. And further on, there are many more things that has to be covered under cardiovascular system. So we will study anatomy and physiology hand in hand. So let us end today's session with the Dhanvantri mantra again. Om Namami Dhanvantaram Adidevam Surasurair Vandita Padapadnam Loke Jalarubhayamrityunasham Dataramishan Vividaushadhina. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you. Have a good day.